For weeks and months, we've been hearing about America's Most Wanted doing a segment on missing Sebastian Rogers of Hendersonville, Tennessee. And now the show has been shown and it will be on Hulu tonight. I'm going to share the audio of this show and I want you to pay close attention to what Chris and Katie Proudfoot say, as well as what Sebastian's dad has to say. You'll see that Katie immediately removes her husband, Chris Proudfoot, from the equation by emphasizing that he was out of town in Memphis at work. Katie jumps straight to taking Sebastian to dinner at the Texas Roadhouse. She then says that after dinner around 9 p.m., Sebastian laid down. She makes it sound like Sebastian went to bed of his own volition and she didn't have to tell him to go to bed. She says nothing about Sebastian saying goodnight to her and saying he loves her and goodnight to the puppies. She simply then jumps to, I heard a noise in his room. She doesn't say when she heard that noise. In earlier interviews, she said it was around 10 p.m. She also doesn't describe the sound. She just says she heard a noise. She doesn't use the word thud. After saying that she heard a noise, she says that she told Sebastian to knock it off and to go to bed. This time she says he answered saying, yes, ma'am. She also doesn't say anything about going to bed herself at midnight. That's a detail that she shared in her interview with Chronicles of Olivia. She then pauses and says, that's the last time I spoke with Sebastian. She doesn't say that was the last time I saw Sebastian. So, did she later see Sebastian? And was he at that later point unable to speak to her? This would be something the deception detective would likely say could be her leaking some truth. You and I both know that Katie Proudfoot is being very careful at this point about what she says publicly about the night Sebastian vanished. Katie later says in the interview that she drove through the neighborhood everywhere. We know that's not true. She made a feeble attempt. She drove down the block. She drove to the school. She didn't bother to go inside the school. She turned around and she went home, and that's pretty much the extent of her search that day. Katie does mention that Chris told her to go home at that point because law enforcement was on its way. This is a sticky point because she has said at other times that she and Chris had a three-way call with the sheriff's office. There was no mention in this interview with America's Most Wanted about the three-way call. She just says Chris told her to go home because law enforcement was on its way. And Chris said in this show what he always says, which is, we have nothing. We just have speculations. And then he spends the majority of his time talking about himself and Katie and Seth being criticized. So Chris has this opportunity. He has this big stage to speak to the entire United States, to talk about Sebastian being missing, to share details about what he looks like, how he speaks, how he walks, how he runs. Instead, he wastes this spotlight by saying that he and Katie have been criticized. How is that going to help America's Most Wanted find Sebastian? So I'm going to play you the audio, and then after that, I'm going to play you what Katie said on Chronicles of Olivia, and I'll allow you to draw your own conclusions.
Before, Sebastian's mother said goodnight to her 15-year-old son. The next morning, Sebastian was gone.
My name is Dean Juvenile. Me a white male, 3 blonde hair, approximately 5 foot, 120 pounds. I was going to be wearing a black sweatshirt, black sweatpants. Juvenile does have a form of autism.
Just warm her up.
Sebastian is tall and skinny, has a contagious smile, loves video games.
Boundless amounts of energy. Sebastian reminds me of a deer prancing through the woods, you know, enjoying the smell, the breeze, new things. That's my son.
February 25th, the day before Sebastian went missing, Chris was in Memphis at work. So Sebastian and I went to Texas Roadhouse. After dinner, right around 9 o'clock, He laid down. I heard a noise in his room. I said, I don't care what you're doing, but you got to knock it off and you got to go to bed. And he answered, yes, ma'am. And I said, okay. And that was the last time that I spoke with Sebastian. The next morning, when I went in his room, he wasn't in his bed. After a minute or two, when I couldn't find him, I called Chris and I said, I can't find Sebastian. He's not in the house.
I got off of work and I had a text message from Sebastian's stepfather.
I said, hey, I don't know how to tell you this, but Sebastian, you're missing.
I headed straight over to their house.
I started driving through the neighborhood. I was panicking. I was looking everywhere. Like, where is he? What happened? Did he go with someone? Did someone take him? By the time I pulled into the school, Christopher was already telling me to turn around because the authorities were on their way.
They used helicopters, they used drones, they used ATVs, horseback.
An extensive search didn't yield one significant lead or even a glimpse of the boy on any doorbell cam video. Days later, investigators combed through a landfill, still saying they had found nothing.
We have nothing. We just have speculations. We get criticized, the father gets criticized, law enforcement's been criticized.
Online sleuths are really analyzing videos and creating their own theories.
Sebastian is putting something in his pocket.
Surveillance footage from a neighbor shows two people outside of Sebastian's house that night. Something happened.
Tonight marks 1 year since Sebastian Rogers disappeared near Beach High School in Sumner County.
My life is not the same without my son. He's not here, and he's somewhere. Someone has him.
This year has been the worst nightmare I could have imagined to come alive.
Just wants whoever has him, just give him back. He's my son.
Wow, that dad. You can feel it. So we want to talk about theories now, Payne, and what might have happened with Sebastian. What are your thoughts?
I mean, here's his house. They searched miles outside of that neighborhood for days. Helicopters on the ground. They even drained a lake. He's nowhere. I don't think Sebastian would have gone outside on his own. There's someone else involved here. Somebody who was familiar to him, but a stranger to everyone else.
We also have to consider he could have left on his own volition. We know children on the autism spectrum tend to wander. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, nearly half of all children on the autism spectrum will go missing at some point from their environment.
Wow.
But I think something caused him to flee his home. Was that into the open arms of a predator, or was there a roaming predator that just happened to see Sebastian walking down through the neighborhood?
And to me, one thing that stands out is his shoes. He always wore his shoes, according to his mom.
Yeah. She shared a story that as a younger boy, he walked through a pile of dirt, turned out to be a bed of fire ants, and he had a thing about always wearing his socks and shoes. I can't think that a 15-year-old child would get up in the middle of the night and leave without his shoes in February. It's cold. So for me, that says that someone has come and taken him, or someone else is involved. Someone knows something. And as easy as it is to be like, oh, that could never happen, like your bedroom is the safest place in the world. Well, no, bedrooms are not the safest place in the world. I was taken from my bedroom. It can happen to anyone.
Yeah.
So when you consider what you just said, Elizabeth, and according to Katie, that night, she goes to bed, he goes to bed, then around 10 p.m., there's a bump or a thud. She calls out to him. He says, I'm fine. Yes, ma'am. I'll stop moving. And then that's the end of it. And according to her, when she went to bed, the doors were locked. And when she woke up, the doors were locked. Were the windows locked? That's a big question. Were they secure? Because if they weren't, it could mean one of two things. That thud, him responding, was someone else in there with him?
Or someone was with him and going.
Exactly.
So I do want to bring up this home security camera footage. This looks like foot traffic right in here.
Yeah, if you look at the footage here, you can see subject number 1, allegedly, right? It looks like something that's illuminated, which, by the way, we haven't mentioned it yet. According to Katie, there was a flashlight that Sebastian liked using that was missing. So you consider that, it does look like 2 people holding flashlights.
Yes, that paints a picture that is foul play.
Yes.
So I want to help the public now. We want to find Sebastian. What do you say to people, Elizabeth?
First of all, to the 16-year-olds of the country, the high school age, really, if you know someone who looks like Sebastian, if you know something about Sebastian, tell your parents, call into the show, call the police, report it. This might be the break that we need. To the parents, if you have seen a 16-year-old boy that looks like Sebastian, do not be afraid to pick up the phone and call.
There is a $50,000 reward to help find him. Sebastian Rogers was about 5'5" when he was last seen, and he wears glasses. Sebastian is not comfortable with strangers.
If you're someone from this small town and you're in this neighborhood, check your cameras. There might be someone sitting on some doorbell cameras footage. I bet you he's in this small town in Tennessee.
Wow, that's an interesting theory.
Asked if I could go and pick her up, and I did. And so we went and did that. We went to BJ's. Had a good time there. He ate a colossal popcorn. Came home to put groceries away because we bought snacks because, you know, he's 15 and snacks. We went to the bowling alley. And then from there we went to dinner. Came home. He took out the trash because that's his chore. He takes the can to the end of the driveway. About 9 o'clock, told him to go to bed. And he's come out of his room where he was playing, and he said, "All right, good night, Mama. Good night, puppies. I love you." And went to bed. He was doing something in his room because about an hour later I heard some noise, and I was like, "I don't care what you're doing in there, but go to sleep." And about midnight I got up and I went to bed. And 6 o'clock I went to wake him up for school Monday morning. And that's when he wasn't here.
What was going through your mind at that point? Like, what were the feelings that you were feeling?
To censor myself. Holy freaking crap, this can't be happening. Where is my kid? Choice words were used. Like, you know, where the F is he, you know. I had looked through the house for him because it was typical for him to get up and come and rummage for snacks and things like that. And he likes to dip behind the, you know, walls and watch, you know. And then he comes out after I come back and he likes to scare me. But after I looked, and I mean, mind you, all of this took place in like 1 minute flat. But I didn't see him in his room. I looked all over. I ran through the whole house. I looked out all the doors and windows, and I was like hollering his name. And I picked up the phone and I called my husband and I said, I can't find him. And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "He's not in this effing house. I can't find our son." And I jumped in my car and I drove around the neighborhood and I drove over by the school, and he's already like, at this point I was like hysterical and I was crying, I was screaming, and he was like, three-wayed law enforcement and was telling them like, our son is missing and we don't know what's going on. And he was like, "Go back to the house, they're on their way." And I drove back to the house, and 20 days later we haven't found him.